Hello and welcome to the Dailies on Echo Television International, your winning station, where we keep you up to date with what's happening from our Nigerian newspaper. I am Sela Elisha, Dashem, and Rachel Tanzi, of course, is my co-host. Good morning.
Morning, Sarah.
How you doing?
I'm fine.
All right, we're live on Facebook and also on YouTube. You can do well to drop your comment or contribution in any story that is of interest to you. And as you know, as later on at 9:30, when we're back from the break, we will open the phone line so you can also call in and air your views on stories that are of interest to you. And let us go through the papers, starting with the Daily Independent newspaper.
On Daily Independent, federal government announces date to get malaria vaccine. As World Health Organization says, 80% of malaria cases, deaths occur in children under 5. Avoid dangerous journey, federal government warns stranded Nigerians in war-torn Sudan. And the big story on Daily Independent, Afenifere lists what Buhari must do to earn forgiveness, tackles him on resurgence of banditry, kidnapping after polls. You can start on the front page and continue with the details on page 35. Gulf of Guinea, Buhari urges regular meetings of member states for peace and security. Lagos PDP suspends chairman, deputy over anti-party activities. PSC okays new commissioners of police for 12 states. The details can be found on page 7. JAM commences UTME exams nationwide with over 1.6 million candidates. Joe Biden, 80, formally declares 2024 re-election bid. The details can be found on page 6. Still on presidential election petition in court, Labour Party exposes moves to withdraw Peter Obi's petition. At the downside of the paper, Sanwo-Olu, Obaseki, Mon, Peter Pan, and Nahoro, and you can find the details on page 7. We have a picture story where you can grab the paper and get more, says the Niger Delta Development Commission, and that's all the news on Daily Independent.
On Daily Sun newspaper, on the National Assembly leadership and ministerial post, lobbyists besiege Tinubu with the riders sleep in vehicles near Asokoro home. APC chair Adamu made president-elect in Defense House. You can find detail of that story on page 6. Ex-Minister Fani Kayode backs Kalu for Senate President, Musa as deputy. You can find more of that story on page 13. Headsmen kill Labour Party chairman in Benue with the rider. Police rescue 2 kidnapped victims in Delta. PSC approves new CPs for Kano, FCT, Delta, Kaduna, Ogun, and 8 other states. You can find more of that story on page 27. UTME begins. Candidates and parents complain of system malfunction, technical glitches, and where you can see the picture story actually showing a cross-section of the students at the UTME exam hall writing the exams. Other stories here we have on federal government Atlanta Global Resources signed memorandum of understanding to construct rail in 9 oil producing states. You can find that on page 2. We are having challenges evacuating stranded Nigerians in Sudan. Air Peace offers to airlift victims from Ethiopia, which you can find more of that story on page 26. And the last story on the paper here we have justice in Nigeria slow, costly, says the report. If you want to know more about that report, do well to grab the Daily Sun and read detail of that story on page 27. And that's all in the Daily Sun newspaper.
On this day newspaper, NDDC, U.S. firm seal $15 billion deal for construction of mega rail line connecting Niger Delta states. The writer says Oshomole, Peterside, Wabote orders Church Commission to entrench sound corporate governance to attract private sector finances. You can find the details on page 11. 2023 World Malaria Day, poor use of local content poses challenge in combating disease, lawmakers lament. Buhari, Nigeria spent $195 million to fight piracy in Gulf of Guinea in 2021. We have a picture that says for a productive NDDC. And the big story on this day newspaper, Adamu APC leaders visit Tinubu, consider South-South for Senate President, Northwest for Speaker. The writer following the story says other interests also pursuing North Central for speakership. Another opposition party asked court to stop Tinubu's swearing in 33 days to inauguration. U.S. grants Nigerians permission to protest against presidential poll. You can find the details of the story inside the paper on page 11. At the downside of the paper, World Health Organization urges Nigeria to commit 80% health sector budget to PHC. The details can be found inside the paper. We have a picture story that says EcoBank Group rings closing going at NGX. And that's all the news on this day newspaper.
On the Vanguard newspaper, how Nigeria can use JAPA syndrome for economic development, coming from the World Bank, which you can find more detail of that story on page 19. We are on the bandit siege. Taraba communities raises the alarm, which you can find on page 13. And we have Buhari Obi Obaseki Sanwo-Olu mourn as iconic journalist Peter Onahoro dies at 88 in London. You can find more of that story on page 6. And on the UTME, candidates and parents decry system malfunction, technical glitches. You can find that on page 7. And on the Niger Delta leaders list section of the PIA for immediate review, which you can find on page 12. The big story on the polls, Obi's case threatened as Labour Party fraction fight dirty, with the writer Apapa seeking to scrutinate Obi petition against Tinubu coming from Abure. And then we have put judiciary, DSS, police, others on notice. It's cheap. I take that is cheap blackmail coming from Apapa. You can read more of that story on page 5. PSC approves appointment posting of 12 CPAs, and we have Nigeria spend $195 million in 2021 to tackle piracy in Gulf of Guinea. This is coming from Buhari. Economic cost of malaria in Nigeria may hit 2 trillion naira in 2030, coming from the federal government. You have to read detail of that on page 25. And on the issue of the war in Sudan, evacuation delayed as federal government warns Nigerian students against dangerous journeys, which you can find on page 9. And we also have on dual citizenship doesn't disqualify anyone born in Nigeria from contesting elections. That is coming from Odo Aka. You can find more of that story on page 8. We have a column for Afe Babalola, which you can read on page 20, and also a column on sports, which you can also find on page 29. We have a picture story where we can see Buhari meet Akufo-Addo. That is during his summit, which he left the country for, the head of the State and Governance of Gulf of Guinea Commission in Accra, Ghana. And that's all on the Vanguard newspaper.
On leadership, anxiety mounts, federal government releases emergency lines. This is still on the war in Sudan. And the first quarter cash crunch to weaken Nigeria's growth in 2023, a report coming from Fitch. We have trending, Nigeria plans to evacuate 3,000 nationals from Sudan. We have diaspora community remits $168.33 billion to Nigerians. You can find the details on page 2. Agora policy list reform options for next government. World Malaria Day, Nigerian children to get vaccine in April 2024. The big story on leadership, Labour Party crisis deepens as Abure Apapa renew hostility. Wrangle over alleged plot to derail Obi's case at tribunal. It's a lie within 5 suit to withdraw petition. The details and more can be found on page 4. Renowned journalist Peter Onahoro dies at 88. Governor Sultan Clark Adebanjo headline Enugu Unity Summit. 10th National Assembly APC leaders, lawmakers strong Tinubu's house. The details can be found on page 19. We have a picture story still showing the president at the summit yesterday, and that's all the news on leadership.
On the Punch newspaper, the big story: Sudan conflict evacuation begins today as federal government releases 150 million naira, hires 40 buses. You can find on page 2. With the right of federal government opposed night road trip, logistic hiccups, delayed Tuesday planned evacuation. 3 Nigerian embassy officers escaped death following attacks by Sudan Rapid Support Forces. And I would like to read a little detail of that story. Barely 24 hours after the president-elect Bola Tinubu arrived, okay, let me take it. I think I'm taking a different story where we have foreign countries are taking advantage of the temporary suspension of hostility to move their nationals from Sudan as deadly fighting between the two forces entered the second week. The clash broke out between East-West and Alliance General Abdal, who heads the Sudanese armed forces and leader of the RSF parliamentary group, General Mohamed Dagalo, over a power-sharing disagreement. The conflict has so far claimed about 500 lives, with thousands of others injured and millions displaced. Foreigners are also fleeing the capital in a long United National convoy, while millions of fighting residents hugged down inside their homes, many running low on water and food. And then you can continue to read detail of that story, because a lot is happening now. We hope that Nigerians that are actually being rescued will actually find their way back. But just worried that we don't have any air, air flight living there. They have to go through the road, so it's really sad. We hope something is done and that they come back home safe. Still on the Punch newspaper, on the National Assembly leadership, Tinubu, the National Working Committee meet contestants. You can find that on page 2. Federal government, U.S. firms sign memorandum of understanding on $15 billion rail project, which you can find on page 23. And we have ex-presidential candidate asked court to stop May 29 inauguration, which you can find more of that on page 7. And on assault, police to prosecute spare part dealer, CP fires DPO. And we have federal government cuts power firm from National Grid. You can find that also on page 19. We have a picture story showing a cross-section of the Lagos-Abeokuta Expressway, Ogun State, on Tuesday. And we can see what the rain is doing, and there is a lot of flood over there as residents are actually trying to find their way out of the flood. And that's all on the Punch newspaper.
On Nigerian Tribune, this regards a paper letter seeking withdrawal of Obi's petition against Tinubu, Labour Party tells Tribunal. While appointment of Alaafin son in delay, this is coming from Makinde. Biden at 80 announces plan to run for second term. The big story on Nigerian Tribune, World Health Organization warns of biological risks after Sudan fighters occupy lab. NEMA makes requisite payment to evacuate Nigerians to now commence evacuation today. The details can be found on page 3. Policeman killed in clash with suspected criminals in Ibadan. Kano, FCT, Bayelsa, Delta, Ogun, 7 others get new CPs. NDDC Atlanta Global signed $15 billion memorandum of understanding to construct railway across 9 Niger Delta states. EFCC arraigns Ondo Speaker orders over alleged fraud. The details can be found on page 26. National Assembly Presiding Officers APC NWC meets today as Adamu other aspirants meet Tinubu. More trials needed for NAFDAC-approved malaria vaccine. This is coming from the World Health Organization. At the downside of the paper, we have fire gods, but Bodija plank market traders count losses. And that's all the news on Nigerian Tribune.
On the Guardian newspaper, on fund repatriation, airfare hit new high as foreign airlines settle for 582 naira per dollar. You can find more of that on page 6. And we have UI replicating Buhari distasteful foreign medical trips, Huriwa tells Tinubu. You can find that on page 5. Darkness loom as TCN moves to disconnect defaulting discourse and GenCos. You can find that on page 3. And the issue of interim government constitutionally forbidding fruit still tempting 30 years after. You have to read more of what that means on page 4 of the Guardian newspaper. And we have on Sudan crisis, federal government to relieve stranded Nigerian via safe route, warn against treacherous journeys, which you can find on page 3. And on persecutory challenge, politics may set fleeing Adamawa wreck free. You can find more of that story on page 6, and we hope that the law finally catch up with him, because he seems to be on the run, and you begin to ask question why if he has nothing to hide. Yes. So we hope that the law will actually catch up with him and the rule of law will actually have its full course. And that's all on the Guardian newspaper.
On Blueprint newspaper, posters Buhari must answer before May 29 handover date. Coming from Afenifera wants 8 months salary of varsity teachers paid, decisive actions on insecurity taken. And the big story, election tribunal, Labour Party's crisis deepens, party alleges plot to scuttle Obi's case, moves to save national chair Abure's job. APC dismisses HDP Awuru's suit against Tinubu's inauguration, says it's an ideal frivolous adventure. Ohanaeze welcomes Tinubu, frowns at omission on transition committee. Transcorp rakes in 134.7 billion naira in 2022 gross earnings. 18,000 persons displayed in 3 weeks in Benue local government. This is coming from SEMA. Veteran journalist Peter Enahoro passes on at 88. Sweepers litter Ayede's office with refuse over unpaid allowances. The details can be found on page 7. At the downside of the paper, still on the 10th National Assembly Speaker, members-elect embark on nationwide tour for Betara. GTCO adopts a cautious approach to loan growth in 2022. And on Sudan crisis, federal government publishes emergency number for Nigerians. The details can be found on page 15, and that's all the news on Blueprint newspaper.
Richard, before I move further to other paper, I'm really worried the resurgence of insecurity that we are having before this May 29. Not only are we seeing like this, look at the statistics we are having for Benue, 18,000 persons displaced in 3 weeks. I begin to wonder what will happen before the handing over May 29. And this handing over is just barely a month from now.
Yes.
And then you begin to ask question, what is the government doing? We had a series of attacks in Plateau State within the weekend. Benue have been attacked over and over, and then we have other part. Taraba community also
Kaduna.
complaining. Kaduna, we've been on. In fact, Kaduna has been like a soft spot for over years right now. We can't even give account of how long. And there are other communities other states that attack have been going on, and you begin to answer question, what is the problem? Yesterday we saw in the paper that right now, as we're having the old Nairas in circulation, because I said the old Naira notes because we can barely set our eyes on the new Naira notes anymore. And this is really scary, because if we have to wait for till December 31st, then we are hoping to see another serious cash crunch.
Yes.
Now, that set aside, we're looking at the issue of the resurgence of insecurity right now in the country. And we can see that a lot is happening. I begin to ask questions, what are the governors, what are the the various ministers, what are the local government chairman, what are the senators, the House of Reps representing these various local government, what are they doing at a time like this? And it's really sad that we keep having this number increasing every day over and over and over. So I'm just hoping that we don't fold our arms and think that everything is well with this country when it is not well. The problem we are having, we keep saying, is good governance in this country. If we are able to govern properly, then Nigerians will have a problem. Nigerians will ask you that if you can keep them safe and sound, if their security can be guaranteed, they can take care of other things by themselves.
Yes.
We are having that right now. There's a soar in prices of even local rice. Right now, the measure of local rice is over 1,000 naira. And then very few people can even afford the foreign rice, not to even talk about the local rice on its own presently. There's hunger in the land, and all of this can be linked to the insecurity, because farmers cannot have access to their farms. So I'm just hoping that our politicians, our leaders will not feel because all is well with them, and then they will not do something about people that are actually living in very abject poverty as a result of insecurity. Because one thing is for sure, Rachel, hunger is what kills people even much more than the war itself. We saw that is the issue. The Nigerians in Sudan are complaining about hunger. So it's right now, it's all about me getting my belly food so I will get the strength to run from anything that is happening. So I hope that our government will actually take this seriously. I know that for years and years, government will come, this administration will come, this administration will go, and we know that insecurity did not just start with this present administration. But regardless, we are hoping that they'll be able to do something, because one of the reasons why people voted this outgoing administration was a promise that they will be able to keep them safe. But we saw that little or nothing was actually done. So I'm hoping and I'm truly trusting. We are not saying that they didn't try their best, but maybe we need to try a different approach. We need to hear the governors crying out louder than they are. That is, if they have been crying out loud for over this year, because you are the mouthpiece of your people at the end of this day. So people who we have elected into various offices, we are not asking you to go there and relax, just be collecting allowance, and you've never passed a bill that will actually benefit the people. Insecurity is really, really killing people, and we are hoping that we'll not just sleep on this matter, but we'll wake up to do the right thing.
So another concerning thing for me about the killings is that it's also very targeted, and we know that Nigerians are opportunists, and I am seeing a lot of assassination going on under the umbrella. Yes, yeah, I am seeing a lot of assassination and targeted killing going under the umbrella or the canopy of herdsmen attacking, because we have seen on the paper where Labour Party chairman has been killed in Benue, and this is not the first. We heard the IGP somewhere, or one police commissioner somewhere, one state or another being killed, or a party chairman being attacked or killed, or one. There has been a lot of targeted killings going on under the umbrella of community killings and all of that. And it tells us that not only are Nigerians taking the advantage of the insurgency in general and the insecurity to also kill specific people and targeted individuals, and then it's all being washed down and being gone as a general, and being tagged rather as a general killing, and then nothing is being said much about it. But the number of targeted individuals that I've seen on the paper, this person, this chairman here, this councillor there, this and that, this chief here. We saw one recently, that died in the hands of kidnappers. I just keep seeing targeted people being taken, kidnapped, and being killed. And then because we know, okay, yes, kidnapping is nothing new, we'll just say it as a random act. However, I believe that there are a lot of targeted crimes going on under the umbrella of random things happening. Is how bad we have, our security have degenerated to such a level that people are going scot-free with murder and hiding it because they have a safe place to hide, and everybody will watch it and see it as something normal. I truly hope that the government steps up and does something and investigate these killings, because it's not only about the 18,000 people who are displaced, but these targeted killings that are happening. It looks like specific chosen people are being terminated and taken out of the system for a reason, and then the government needs to investigate and know truly what is happening. We are tired of the umbrella of herdsmen, gunmen, this attack, kidnappers. No, we are tired of that umbrella kind of thing. We want an investigation and the details, and the government should be able to answer the people's questions.
Yeah, you know, just like I said, even though we are not going to rule out the fact that, yes, we have the issue of the headers and, you know, farmers clash left, right, and center happening. I think that was what we heard in the Berkeley, even though the stories are not really clear whatsoever is happening there. But I'm just hoping, just like you said, that truly the government will do something about it. We keep saying government, why? Because it is your responsibility as a leader. Protect lives and property first and foremost. Before we start seeing projects coming up left, right, and center, first and foremost, protect the lives of people. If not, if there are no people who will enjoy the structures you are building at the end of the day. So we hope to see that. Well, let's take a look at the New Telegraph newspaper, with the first story I'll be taking. CPS Investments in bank dropped by 22.1% to 452.9 billion naira, which you can find on the front page and more inside the paper. Global economic uncertainty pushes oil price below $82. You can find that on page 2. And on Senate presidency, group urges Tinubu to support Kalu. You can find that on page 3. And 6, we have allegation of petition, withdrawal false, Labour Party, Arabami tells Tribunal. And then we have Joe Biden announces 2024 presidential run, which you can find inside the paper. The big story on May 29th, 2019 presidential candidate files suit to stop Tinubu, claim his constitutional winner of 2019 presidential polls, say Buhari can only superintend interim placeholders inauguration. You can find more of that on page 2. Coming from Benue State, IDPs won't be counted if census hold coming from autumn. You can find that story on page 3. And on Sudan crisis, federal government publishes emergency number for trapped Nigerians. We have alleged money laundering, court orders release of documents in Fani Kayode Usman trial to EFCC. And we have PSC approved new CPs for FCT, Sokoto, and 10 other states. Dual citizenship doesn't disqualify anyone born in Nigeria from contesting election. With the rider, can youth congratulate and commit to working with Tinubu? Can youth congratulate and commit to working with Tinubu? You can find that on page 2 and 8. We have a picture story and also a study, so you can grab the New Telegraph newspaper and read more detail of any story that actually gets your interest. But before we move further, Rachel, let's just take this time out because I think our viewers are actually itching to, air their views on stories that are of interest to them. So when we come back from the break, we'll open the phone lines. Please do not go anywhere. Welcome back. If you're just tuning in, it's still the Dailies on Equa Television. We've been looking at various stories that will be of interest to you this morning. We are looking at still the, propaganda and also your walk towards who will be the Senate President, also the Speaker. And also we still have the federal government have, placed some emergency numbers for Nigerians in Sudan to actually call in case of any problem. And then these are many other stories we've been looking at on the papers this morning. So we'll beg your indulgence to please call us on the numbers displayed on your screen at this moment. Please do remember, turn down the volume of your TV set when you call us, or you move away so we can actually hear you clearly in the studio, because we are really interested in what you have to contribute concerning the growth of Nigeria and the growth of everything as a whole. I still have Rachel Tanzania with me. Thanks, Rachel.
You're welcome, Sally.
Yes, and I'm still Sela Elisha. And let's move to the next paper, Rachel.
On the Nigerian Standard, kerosene price rises by 102.37%. This is a report from the NBS. Explore natural capital to finance SDGs. Buhari warns Nigerians trapped in Sudan against traveling. Buhari, Obasanjo go on others to attend Osibajo book launch. And the big story, over 10 million malaria cases death recorded annually. This is coming from a group. You can start on the front page and continue inside the paper on page 2. Buhari warns Nigerians trapped in Sudan against traveling. We have a picture story that shows Plateau Southern Senatorial District Senator Professor Nora Ladi Daduit test riding one of the tricycles presented to the youth of her senatorial zone recently in Shandam local government area. And that's all the news on the Nigerian Standard.
All right, let's take a look at the National Star newspaper, where we have EFCC arranged undo Speaker 2 orders for fraud, which you can find on page 7. NCC refused report of 17 billion naira of 20. The big working hard to scuttle Obi's case, Labour Party cries out, with the writer says petition against Tinubu's stance. You can find more of that big story on page 17. 100,000 deaths annually remains public health challenge in Nigeria, coming from the reps in relation to celebrating the international today. Tinubu's Transition Committee, Ohanaeze, condemns non-inclusion of Igbos. You can find that on page 8. Ex-presidential candidate asks court to stop Tinubu's inauguration. You can find that also on page 18. And we have at 80, Joe Biden announcing 2024 re-election bid. India to overtake China this week as world's most populous nation. This is a report coming from the UN. You can find more of that story on page 10. They have actually been, when I say between China and India, we're actually checking who has the highest population. So it's obvious India is actually taking over. Well, you can read more of that story on page 10. We have cop kills 7 arrested as hoodlums and police clash in Oyo State, which you can find on page 8. And we have the picture story showing the president during the summit in Ghana yesterday. And that's all on the new National Star newspaper.
On the Matrix newspaper, why I retired permanent secretary. This is coming from Umahi. Coming from Makinde, why I have not appointed new Alafin. You can find the details on page 4. CBN defends forex ban on stockfish importation. The details can be found on page 12. Chelsea in talks with Pochettino. You can find the details on page 17. Report revealed 8 states got zero investment in 4 years. The big story, Labour Party crisis takes new turn. Party uncover plot by a Papa-led faction to sabotage Obi at tribunal. Obi denies saying serious leaders don't go on holidays. Major shakeup as 12 states get new commissioner of police. Tinubu's health insurance will cover 87 million Nigerians in first 2 years. This is coming from the APC chieftain, and we are looking forward to that. You can find the details on page 9. Buhari sets to unveil Nigerian Army's new regimental colors on Thursday. This is in line with May 29th. You can find the details on page 9. We have at the downside of the paper, foreign transactions on NGX fall by 53%, a report that you can find on page 4. We have a picture story that says the Senate president sorted out. President-elect Asiwaju Bola Tinubu, the national chairman of the ruling All Progressive Congress, Senator Abdullahi Adamu, Senator Godswill Opabio, and other party leaders, including the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Femi Bajabiamila, at Tinubu's residence in Abuja yesterday. And that's all the news on the Matrix newspaper.
On Nigerian News Direct, 17 billion naira, NCC debunks news of deficit in 2021 budget. On World Malaria Day, Dangote advocates global joint action to end crunch by 2030. And on May 29, suspend as opposition expand court option to stop Tinubu's inauguration, which you can find on page 21. The big story on infrastructure revival, NDDC, U.S. firm sign memorandum of understanding to connect Niger Delta states by rail as minister launch NDDC for adopting PPP model. You can find that on page 2. We have a picture story on the NGX, which you can do, but grab the Nigerian News Direct and read more detail of that story.
On First News newspaper, Sudan crisis. Federal government warns stranded Nigerians against self-evacuation to borders. Crisis hits Lagos PDP as party suspend chairman and deputy. JAMB begins UTME for over 1.6 million candidates. Shake-up in police, 12 states get new commissioners. And the big story on the first news, stop Tinubu's inauguration, ex-presidential candidate begs appeal court. Prays court to prohibit President AGF INEC from inaugurating president-elect on May 29. Claims he won 2019 presidential poll, accuses Buhari of usurping his office in the past 7 years. Labour Party factional chairman Apapa approaches tribunal to withdraw Peter Obi's case against Tinubu. At the downside of the paper, why emergence of new Alafin son in delayed? You can find the details inside the paper, and this is coming from Makinde. Dual citizenship doesn't disqualify anyone born in Nigeria from contesting elections. R. Kelly to serve 30 years jail term in North Carolina prison. And that's all the news on First News newspaper.
Let's take a look at the Sweet Crude report, where we have federal government says $2.8 billion AKK pipeline project now at 43% completion. You can start reading on the front page and also inside the paper. And we have Pengasa and clarify stand on petrol subsidy removal. You want to know more about what they have to say? Do well to get the Sweet Crude report and read more detail of that story on page 1. We have the big story that says Nigeria loses 81 billion naira to gas flaring in 2 months. You read more of that. We remove 460 illegal connection on Trans-Niger pipeline coming from Shell. You read more of that story inside the paper, and that's all on Sweet Crew reports.
1 minute.
Right, let's take a look at the next paper, which is Business Day, Rachel.
Yes, on Business Day newspaper, SA races ahead of Nigeria to fund post-COVID strategy. And the big story, Northern Oil surge under spotlight as Buhari exits NER. Landway floats 20 billion naira commercial paper to boost expansion, while Netflix invested more in South Africa than Nigeria. If you want to know more, find the details on page 21. We have a picture story still on the NGX meetings, and that's all the news on Business Day.
All right, let's still look at the Business Standard newspaper, where we have genocide scholars recognize 1971 genocide by Pakistan during Bangladesh Liberation War. You find more of that international story inside the paper. We also have power rate hike again in June to meet the IMF conditions. There were some disagreement on the mode of reserve calculation, officials said, which they hope will be resolved in the next course of discussion. You can find more of that issue of power inside the paper. India cleared to transport goods through the CTG Mongal ports. We have Japan rolls out red carpet for the PM Sheikh Hassani. We have no loans from Taka Fund if the EDF export proceed not repudiated. And we have Bangladesh 12 notches up in World Bank Logistic Performance Index. BB has been reduced lending from the EDF to boost reserve. We have more stories. You want to check the retailer electricity tariff after the hikes, and then that's just to show that the hikes is not just in Nigeria. I know we've complained when there was hike of electricity, even though there was no prior notice for the hike, and then we can see that we don't even have power. That is my problem. The fact that there's a hike and but then there's no light. Yeah. So you begin to ask what really is the problem. There was, I think last year or so, we saw when the Minister of Power gave us an excuse that there was no water in the dams, and people were kind of surprised. Did you not know that we're going to have a situation where there will be no rains, and then you are supposed to keep the dams with enough water to supply electricity, and then sometimes we see that it's either the megawatts we're having is too low to actually send light all over. So a lot of questions are being raised concerning that. That's just one sector out of many other sectors that are actually not performing well. So I hope that this will be an eye-opener. We understand, like, coming from Bangladesh is actually to meet the IMF. We know there's global inflation and all of that, but then back here at home, we begin to ask questions, what really is the problem? We have enough, all we need to. There was flood, I know, jokingly people say that. So we have enough water that can even cause flood, yet we don't have water that will produce or generate electricity. So a lot of questions are coming, but we hope that as a country we'll look inwardly, not just looking at the sector of power, but then we look at even water, because there's no water enough for people, especially here in Plateau State. There have been scarcity of water. I mean, it has been a really serious problem, and coupled with the fact that the rain is not really coming as it should be. So a lot of things need to be really looked into before this inauguration takes place.
Yeah, you know, we've become a country of flimsy excuses, Sele. That's all I can say. When we have a problem and you hear the kind of excuses that the people in charge give, you wonder, what do you have all these resources for? If this is a problem, then there is no need giving you all of these things at your disposal. And this cut across to every sector. It's not only for the power sector. We can say the same for water. We can say the same for agriculture. We can say the same for virtually every sector in the Nigerian system. And I'm looking forward to where we will not take that excuse. When you are being asked by the federal government and the person in charge of a particular sector, and when you don't have a concrete or very valid reason to why there is a certain problem, then you should be given a query, I guess, or something. But then it's about time we stop taking flimsy excuses and making them a valid or a concrete excuse for what we are or where we are at the moment, because it is really a sad thing to hear things like that being said when we know how the system should work and what is expected, but you don't deliver, but then you feel that this is a good enough excuse. This cut across every part of Nigeria and our economy and our system, and we don't want that anymore.
Yeah, you know, when you're talking about other sector, it just drew me that just yesterday, right, we celebrated the World Malaria Day, and then we're seeing that over 10 million malaria cases and then dead we recorded. And even though we saw that the vaccine will be coming in next year, but then what are we planning to do before then? We say that mostly children under the age of 5 are the ones that are suffering dead, and then we've seen that sometimes even the drugs being given, you treat malaria today, before next 1-2 weeks you're back in the hospital. So I think a lot needs to be done. Well, that's all on the TBS newspaper.
On Punch Sport Extra, Obona, Falcon star inspired by dad. Boniface on Leipzig radar. Pochettino agrees to coach Chelsea. United suffer Fernandez blow ahead Spurs clash. You can find the details on page 5. We have our Premier League fixtures where we can see Chelsea versus Brentford, Blues, Bees clash in West London derby. We have Manchester City.
We have a call. Hello. All right, we lost that call. Let's go on, please, Rachel.
Yes, we have Manchester City versus Arsenal, leaders battle holders in potential decider. We have Girona beat Madrid yesterday 4-2, and we have Leipzig and Balogun interest over £35 million fee. Madrid battle 5 EPL teams for Chikuze. We have from star to flops, Eagles star who failed to shine at new clubs. And at the downside of the paper, we have Tottenham Hotspur stars to refund fans for Newcastle defeat. The details can be found on page 8. We have Kovacic feels at home at Chelsea. The details can be found on page 4. And that's all the news on Punch Sport Extra.
Well, thank you so much, Rachel, for
doing this with me.
Thank you to a call that was almost coming in, and then we lost that call. We hope that you keep the spirit alive and call us tomorrow, because we are really interested to hear what you have to say and contribute. Thank you to the crew members, to the general manager, the ECHO executive. Thank you for our supporters. Thank you so much. Your support is what has been keeping the station moving, and we're truly grateful. We will not take all of the support for granted. Thank you so much. Until we come here again tomorrow, do have a glorious day ahead.